In September, homeowners will be able to apply for a share of a £2 billion government grant that will offer up to £5,000 per household to improve the energy efficiency of that home. The improvements that will be included on the Green Homes grant will be things like insulation, whether it be external insulation or loft insulation, windows, so long as you're going from single glazed windows to double glazed windows, that will have a thermal improvement. Things like air source heat pumps, so long as you're not replacing what was already an efficient heating system with an air source heat pump, then you can start applying for these grants. Solar thermal will be included as well. Solar thermal is a set of panels. We're probably used to seeing solar photovoltaic panels that turn our sunlight into electricity, but solar thermal will be panels that go on the roof that actually make water hot rather than generate electricity. And those will be included so long as the approved contractor deems that they would be an improvement to your property. Not included in the Green Homes grant are replacement boilers, for instance. We've noticed that that has actually been singled out at an early stage. So even if you've got an old boiler that is on its last legs, just replacing to a new boiler is not actually going to get you any kind of benefit from this grant at all. You would have to look at some form of renewable, perhaps the solar thermal panels or air source heat pumps in addition, and you'd get the benefit against the solar thermal panels but not against the new boiler that you put in at the same time. Well, if you're anywhere in the UK, you will be able to apply for this grant, and it will pay for up to 2/3 of the cost of doing those improvements, up to a maximum of £5,000, so long as you go through a recognised Trustmark or microgeneration certification scheme contractor. The grant is open to all homeowners and potentially landlords as well who have permanent residence in those properties, because that is already a stipulation on the MCS guidance. But you will have to keep an eye on this website so that we can actually be able to tell you later on as the information becomes evident to us. The grant is only going to be eligible for applications from September. That's the indication we've been given at this point. That could change at any time. So do keep up to date with the latest information. The grants will be available to everybody, but you need to understand that there's a two-tier system. You first will be asked, you can't put in a heat pump if you haven't already done the insulation to a certain level. So you will have different tiers. You can't go to tier 2 if you haven't already accomplished tier 1. At this stage, the actual details of how one applies for this grant is a little bit needing more information, but it'll most likely be online, and you will have to then be appointed, once you've applied for it, to a Trustmark or microgeneration certification scheme contractor who will then quote up the remedial actions that can be done on your property, and at that point you can then be eligible for that grant. The potential drawbacks of the Green Homes grant are, albeit that the Trustmark and microgeneration scheme are great in that they will give continuity and quality to the installations, it might also exclude certain trades that perhaps haven't got the time or the ability to apply to become Trustmark accredited installers. So you might have the one van operation where they just simply can't become Trustmark accredited installers, and someone that you want to use, but you won't be allowed to because you have to use people that are Trustmark accredited or MCS. So that might be the only drawback that I see from that perspective. The second drawback, I would say, is that people might look at doing the minimum in order to get up to the £5,000 mark and not actually look at the holistic the holistic amount of work that needs to be done. So if you're just putting in cavity wall insulation but you're not treating the outside of your wall because the treatment isn't included, you might then end up actually doing damage to the building, because if you have ingress of water through the outer leaf of the building, then it could then start bridging across the cavity which was there to stop water coming across, but you've filled it now and you start getting damp on the building. So if the jobs aren't being done in completion, then that could be another drawback to it. Hence why I think the Trustmark needs to be brought in and the job's done completely. Later this month, we will be seeing an energy advice, the Simple Energy Advice, or SEA service, is going to be set up so that homeowners can actually call in to get advice on what will be eligible and what won't be eligible, and who would be able to support them with that kind of funding. The application process is going to be in September, but we don't know how it's all happening at this point. We know that the funding's there, but we also don't know what the uptake's going to be. Will it be best to get in as soon as we can because the funding will disappear, or do we wait a little bit? Those are the questions we just don't know. And do we want to just apply and then get turned down, or should we actually do our homework and wait for that information to be there? And I think that the energy advice lines and getting the information that you need for your property early will be absolutely crucial, especially if you have an existing project that you're wanting to start but just want to know, will I actually get funding? You'd hate to be at the other end of the project and think I could have got £5,000. I think older properties, I'm not really going to put a date on it, but older properties that haven't really had much improvement due to economic circumstances perhaps, or the fact that they've been let out to tenants, perhaps. I know that with tenants in a property now, landlords have an ownership of the building to make sure that it meets minimum requirements for energy performance as of April. But you could make further improvements. Older buildings that are listed, perhaps you can't make changes, so there'll be certain things like single glazing that you just simply can't change. But I think that there'll be quite a lot of people, especially those perhaps retired generation, or those that are working and are very close to the poverty threshold and just haven't been able to make the improvements to the property. So this will be something that they will be able to benefit from, and that will also mean that their monthly outgoings come down. So not only do you have a better living environment, but you have less expense going forward. So I think it's going to be those kinds of properties, perhaps even ex-council type properties. We see quite a lot of those properties that have gone into private ownership and perhaps haven't been improved. So going forward, I think that those kinds of properties are the real targets, especially with the low-hanging fruit like loft insulation and better windows if they've got single glazing and stuff like that. So an EPC will be done on them. If the guys are in poverty, they actually can get a bigger grant. They get up to £10,000 worth of improvements.